again. So, great. So you're currently at Shift Paradigm, right?
Correct.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about Shift Paradigm, what you guys do over there, as well as what you're specifically doing.
Yeah, I'm the former CEO and founder of a RevOps consultancy called LeadMD. We were acquired in 2021 as part of an agency roll-up. And so Shift Paradigm really is the combination and collaboration of a number of different consultancies and agencies really focused around digital marketing and with an end-to-end value proposition. So everything from ideal customer profile assembly and market research, all the way through to go-to-market strategy, into people, process, technology, building stacks, helping organizations, facilitate and operationalize their go-to-market motion, and then really even into day-to-day buyer engagement. We do a lot of campaign strategy and execution work for our clients. I run the go-to-market side of the house, so everything sales, marketing, partnerships ultimately rolls up to me, and we serve really considered purchase buyers. So used to be heavy in B2B, and that's certainly still one of our specialties, but also B2B, B2C considered purchase, anyone that really has an educational sales cycle and is looking to engage the buyer throughout that process.
Great. So what have you been seeing lately on that front? As far as the go-to-market, demand gen, side of things.
Yeah, well, obviously COVID was a massive kind of, inflection point for most organizations, as that last decade plus promise of truly serving the digital buyer, understanding their footprint, what they need, what they want, and engaging with them with that hyper personalized message. That was kind of the BS caller on, are you actually ready to facilitate that online conversation? And so I think most organizations either you really doubled down and were able to take advantage of the processes that they had built and just were able to understand what that change meant for the buyer and really engage them with that infrastructure, or found themselves in a position where they had to really hurry and catch up and figure out how to put that value forward, hyper value type messaging in front of a customer, and then facilitate that through what is today a very complex technology stack and all the processes that kind of stem from that. So regardless of whatever camp that you fell into, I think demand gen today ultimately looks like value creation for the client at that first, very first touch point, but potentially not even within a branded environment, right? Like if you fulfilled the promise of becoming a media publisher, which I think most brands are focused on these days, disseminating your content across the buyer's ecosystem, their world, and providing them value right from that first interaction. I think one of the biggest kind of fallacies about demand gen historically, if you look at how we've run those processes, it was largely about kind of, I hate to say trickery, but like that we're gonna do whatever we can to pull the buyer into this conversation, and that conversation is going to be the start of that sales process. That squarely no longer works. You have to be providing that hyper value, that what is the client looking for, and in that regard, I think you have to kind of reverse engineer the buyer's buying process. What are they ultimately getting out, or what are their problems? What can they get out of a solution like yours? Whether you're service based like we are, or you're a technology or a product. What is that mission critical value that ultimately they're going to be realizing through that product or service, and moving that value right to the beginning of that buying process? And I think in COVID, you saw a lot of that manifesting. Some organizations were kind of doing the, hey, how are you doing? How is this affecting you? The best organizations already knew how that buyer was being affected by the massive change that we were undergoing, and they were able to respond and say, here, this will help you, because they really understood that ideal customer, that buyer, and so they had that pinpointed already. Again, a lot of orgs out there were playing catch up, and frankly still are.
Oh yeah, I think that's honestly the majority of them are still trying to play catch up, and I don't know how much of that has to do even with COVID versus just needing to revamp and play catch up across the board. Jared,
Sure.
welcome in.
My apologies for the delay. There's more technical difficulties in Zoom than ever. I was just yelling at somebody I used to advise about. They came to me asking for a sales rep. I went to their website and saw their process to like get started. And that one thing led to another. And I was on a call with them saying, how am I going to refer you to somebody who's got such a shitty fucking process? I'm like, get started. So right above the form that they had to fill out was a phone number and email, right? So it was like, hey, like fill this form out.
Choose your own adventure, right?
choose your own adventure, but the adventure doesn't end with you getting in this product. And I'm like, is your price point still $200 a month? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not referring anybody to you. like you can't get in the product. Like, anyway, I thought that was kind of relevant. My delay to out. Well, that's growth.
So you look at someone, so like take that example, right? Like who's doing product-led growth really well these days? I would argue that Superhuman does a great job at PLG. And just compare and contrast those two processes. I don't know if anyone listening is a user of that platform. It's an email solution, right? Like you can easily choose any email solution to do this. Why do you need this new technology? Like being able to show that in a very frictionless process, and also the one that's enabled by a human, which I think is one of the best things that they do, is a great, again, compare and contrast to what I think you just mentioned.
And I'm telling you, I'm like, sign up for Rev Genius on your site now. We have a team with no development or whatever, and you could get in the product in under a minute or 2 minutes. And the only reason why that extra minute is because we actually want the member data. Like we intentionally have a little bit of a buy-in because we want to bring the right person in that's going to be more engaged and more active. Can we do it quicker? Absolutely. We could just ask for the email. We could ask for less than that, right? Like we could do an auth 0 and we could optimize on that. But does optimizing on that take away from the other metrics coming? And that's where you have to find the sweet spot.
Oh, there's absolutely a time and a place for intentional friction. It's not about removing friction at all costs. It's about having friction in there that provides value.
Yes.
Create that friction, leave it in there, engineer it, whatever. But the last thing you want to do is just create a bunch of noise downstream that you can't, filter as efficiently as you can further upstream.
Yeah, and there's friction everywhere, right? Like, go into this and friction. Jared's coming in out of nowhere. Pardon me. Friction with pricing, sometimes intentional, right? Like subscription versus upfront versus transactional. Subscription in or friction, and I'm like in price. And
I think the key there is intentionality, right? Like, have you intentionally understood the buyer that you're looking for? Do you understand the value that they need? And have you constructed a process that supports those two, right?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, my favorite was my first B2B SaaS company I worked at. Like we kept whittling things down. So we're very much a B2C play in a B2B app. And so anybody as a Salesforce user could come in and use the product, start a free trial, whatever. And we kept whittling it down. And so when I first started, it was like a 3-4 minute process. And it was funny. We talk about intentional friction. We were a Salesforce app, so it was back in the very, very early days of the App Exchange before it was all curated and everything. And so it was literally a leaderboard. If you went to the App Exchange, it was the top 10 apps. And we hacked our way to the top of it because ours was a Chrome extension and every single user had to install. And so one of the things in the algorithm was one of the primary drivers of it was number of installs. And so we would have people start on the website. We would route them to the App Exchange, which would route them back to the website where they could install the extension, which was honestly not a great user experience. But holy crap, the visibility we got, number one on the App Exchange. Like that was literally like our growth hack to get ourselves out the door.
We had a client that ran a very similar process. They were a Outlook extension, company called Harmony, out of Israel. I don't even know if they're still around anymore. This was
I
like
know
over a
them.
decade. Do you?
I spoke
Are
to
they
them a
still
year
around?
ago.
Okay.
They're in my pipeline somewhere.
Yeah, so they were a similar type of install, and obviously had taken advantage of that process to rank pretty highly there.
Well, cool. We sort of jumped right into it, but we have a few questions we typically go through as part of this. So, not to derail organic conversation, but
we've introduced how great Justin is already, right? Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
cool.
We've checked that one off the list.
Got that. That's how we jumped right into the conversation. But debunk a myth for us about outbound or demand gen.
Well, I think that's kind of where we started there as well, right? Like demand gen used to be kind of this bait and switch. If you go back, early days of software, right? Like whatever you could do to get them in front of a rep so they could qualify that individual and kind of give them their pitch. And then, obviously marketing came on board with things like nurturing and so on, and just started bombarding, these buyers. It really is about that myth of like, I'm going to hook someone and try to play this volume game and throw as many people across the line as possible. I think, that just, it's still something I see in play today, the whole MQL and the driver of marketing's quote unquote success. That value that we talked about earlier in terms of bringing that right to the front of the marketing and the acquisition process is really what yields quality. And if there's an organization out there that's not measuring some aspect of quality in relation to that demand gen process, and not bridging that aisle across to sales if they have two different teams, I think that's where things like, hopefully, although it's kind of headed in the opposite direction, things like the CRO should be bringing together those two different worlds and looking at different metrics in terms of valuable conversations, qualified conversations that are really yielding further progression within that buying process. But still, the biggest myth I see is, at the end of the day, when organizations start to scale, they are playing the numbers game out there, and there's so many ways to manipulate those numbers, and it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, what would be a good game plan? And the question came up today in like one of these fractional groups that we're in. Like, what would you do if you're transitioning from founder led to like,
Sure.
The next part of the organization? So this kind of, it should be set up at the same time, in my opinion, but I'm curious as to, what you would do to combat that and help people.
The craziest thing that I see, and I'm curious if you guys see this as well, like marketing's relationship with the customer tends to be really bad, right? Like maybe someone comes across the line as a case study, or is willing to hop on a webinar or what have you, but other than that, they really don't have a clear line of sight into the clients that they're targeting. What are they dealing with on a daily basis? Like, what are the problems that they had? How are they using your solution? What's the value that they're seeing out of it? What's the perception of that within the organization? So my key to anything in terms of marketing optimization is, break down that barrier between your marketing team, your BDR, SDR team. Certainly the sales team should already be doing this. And then, same thing for the client success team. But like, you have to be having those conversations with the customer and understanding how are they using your product? What's the value that they see from it? And then I always coach organizations to bring that value into the marketing process, bring that to the front of your demand gen, your acquisition process, because that's what people are really, that's why they're renewing. That's why they're keeping your product. So why not use that insight and that leverage and provide some of that to them right up front to bait the hook, quote unquote.
It's so funny you go this way. I just interviewed a business development leader, and I asked him the biggest myth in revenue. He goes, the biggest myth is that founders and executive leaders actually know the problem that they're solving. They have like, and the impact it drives. And then, so they're creating this other messaging with what they think, and then they're hammering their TAM with that, which isn't connecting.
And no matter how well you've done or think that you've done in terms of messaging, in terms of like understanding the buyer and developing that TAM and that ICP, I guarantee if you talk to your entire client portfolio, they have a different perception of you. Like, we run into this all the time, right? It depends on how we enter the client, but let's say we enter the client through a marketing automation implementation. And let's say we do no AD, no account development, like don't strategically grow that account. They will know us for life as a Marketo implementer or a HubSpot implementer. And if you look at how that's perceived from the organization at the CMO level or at the CEO level, like the decision maker level, you're a practitioner at that point. And that's great that we do that really well, but we do so much more than that. And in order to be effective in standing up technology, like you have to have all those gaps filled. You have to really understand, how's my go-to-market strategy translate into my go-to-market process? Like how am I structuring my teams? Like just all those different components, right? And so by providing value in those manners, we make technology so much more effective. But if we've come in, through a technology stand-up, like that's what they know us as. So either we can shape that perception or we can allow that to persist. And if we do, we're not continuing with that client. We'll be one and done every single time. So no matter how well you think you're doing at that right now, you can do better.
Obviously it's easier said than done to bring down those barriers and get coordination between roles and departments. What are some of the things that you've found that are particularly effective in driving that?
So like take those conversations that you're having with the buyer, right? Like the thing I find most interesting, and this translates really well to software because I think they do a terrible job at this, is measuring. We have all the traditional marketing and sales KPIs, right? Like, but the most effective KPI I think that we measure internally and that we coach clients measuring is understanding the desired outcome that client purchased you to achieve, right? And we actually track that, right? We have, I won't get into all the weeds of it and so on, but like we created a custom object in Salesforce. It's actually our better perception of the buyer journey or the perception of a lead. What initially do they want to accomplish? And then what are the deliverables necessary to make that happen? What is the result going to be? What's the KPI that we can measure at the end of the day? And that kind of becomes the foundation for everything that we do. So, after you have those conversations and you get a better understanding of your buyer and who they are and what they want to do, track that and keep that, relevant and frictionless between each one of those handoffs. I think the worst thing software companies do right now is, maybe they're doing a great job in sales and marketing, but they have a terrible handoff to customer success. Like you essentially get resold at that. All right, what do you want to do with this technology, right? Like I already told 3 people what I want to do with this technology. I told them like what I have to have done in what period of time. And now you're essentially like going through that process again. And it often gets weeded down or boiled down into usage metrics, right? Like how many users do they have? Are they logging in regularly? Like kind of that, I hate to say it, but that kind of gain side approach, or at least a superficial gain side approach, right? Like if you go deeper into that and really understand, hey, how does someone need to be using this to accomplish that mission critical goal so that you don't get cut come budget season, so that COVID doesn't hit and you immediately get that cancellation email? Like that's what you should be bringing up and surfacing as a critical KPI within your org.
Truly serving the digital buyer.
Am I echoing a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think that's the key, is having an agreed upon metric, whether you call that a North Star or a KPI, whatever, that carries over across those different departments and roles. It's really hard to get alignment if you don't have agreement on what the goal is. And so, at our trying to do that, I mean, we dealt with that.
Or have a goal that's important enough, right? Like if we're not measuring something that fundamentally matters to that business, when they're getting together in that departmental meeting or a board meeting or whatever that forum is, if we don't understand what they're talking about in that forum, again, like we're not providing true value.
Yep. And then in particular, if you can find something that's a forward facing metric, so that it's good, and it's certainly better than a lot do to have a metric in common that everybody's aiming for. But it's problematic whenever that's a rear facing metric, because then you either exceed or you miss, and now you're having to go and try and recreate it and figure out, okay, why did we exceed or why did we miss? And at the end of the day, like what you really want to have in the gold standard is something that's going to give you ahead of time an indicator of how that's going to play out, instead of waiting until afterwards.
Yeah, and in that process, you have to be really careful who you're serving, right? Like you want to be serving your primary buyer. Like sometimes our primary buyer is a practitioner. It's a, marketing ops manager or marketing automation manager, something along those lines. And their goal might be doing something more efficiently or, cutting down the time it takes to get a campaign out the door. But you've got to be threading across that organization and understanding, all right, what's the CMO want to do? What's the VP of demand want to do? And serving those masters as well, because at the end of the day, efficiency is just a really bad metric to come into a board meeting with.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's always good whenever your conversation leads into the next question. KPI is important to you. I think we covered that one. What are challenges? What are things that you're seeing that are keeping you up at night? Relative to this.
Yeah, I think that I'll use a very recent challenge that keeps like noise is the very square answer to that question. Like everyone is trying to do all the things all the time, and where I see that becoming most detrimental and also kind of conflicting with it's events, right? Like, so we're finally getting back into in-person events, which is awesome because I think most of us are certainly ready to do so. But when we're kind of going into that with the same approach that we did before the pandemic, right? Like it's like we haven't learned anything from these like highly personalized, bespoke experiences. We're kind of just, hey, what's your booth? What activation do you want to pick off the list to bring people to that booth? And so we just dealt with this with SaaStr, which is a great show, which I think has scaled really well in terms of quality of content and so on. But the optionality in terms of what you want to do there, like I don't want to just serve coffee. I don't want to have some juggler out in front, right? Like I want to do something that is going to be, again, providing value to the buyer that I want to bring into my area. So, that noise is just really hard to cut through when you've got, firewalkers and jugglers and so on, and you want to do something that's truly different. And you've also got kind of the event folks and the event coordinators and so on kind of saying no fit within that box. So I think it's harder than ever to stand out. And, as a marketer, hopefully folks are love the creative process and love coming up with ideas to do so. But the different barriers that kind of exist there is certainly something that worries me and is one of the primary things that I try to push down to my team. Like, what are we doing differently here? How are we pushing the envelope? And how are we really standing out with the folks that we want to serve?
Now, I'm curious. Oh, go on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's noise in everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to be a marketer today, you need to have a LinkedIn account and post every day, for instance.
Sure.
And frankly, to the credit of a lot of them, they're doing a better job from like driving metrics and like good metrics than some traditional marketers. When you have these other noise channels and all around, like it's I think it emanates with a good thing that it's easier to get started to do anything now than ever. It's ever
barriers
been.
are extremely low.
Like the barriers are low. You want a course, get a Gumroad. You don't have money to pay for a Gumroad, great. They have a freemium, not a problem. like you don't know how to do that. There's a community of people that'll volunteer to help you set up your Gumroad for free. The barriers are lower than they've ever been. How do you get past that?
Yeah, I think you're right. The barriers are lower than they've ever been, but at the same time, there's like 50 foot of crap that all looks the same. And I think the people that are effectively break out of that mold are the folks that are, frankly, it's not a sexy answer, but they're willing to do a little bit more. They're willing to give away what the next person isn't, or they're willing to like I think Jason Lemkin does a great job on LinkedIn, right? And he's giving insights that, frankly, other folks just aren't thinking to give or aren't willing to provide kind of within that forum. So I think it goes back to hyper value again. Like, do I understand what my buyer needs? And am I willing to go just that little bit extra? I don't think you have to, throw streamers and, like stand out doing crazy, wacky things. I think you just have to give people what they want, quite frankly. And what they don't want is, my company's doing a webinar tomorrow. Here's here's the link to register. You know what I mean? To your point, like everyone's doing that. What are you doing that goes that little bit beyond? Hey, here's one of the, you know, a toolkit or a framework that we're going to talk about. Take that for free. And, you know, if that interests you, sign up for this webinar, right? Like it's, again, I think there are ways that you can just adopt that hyper value mentality in everything that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the lower barriers to entry that Jared mentioned, obviously a lot of that, most of that is, goes back to technology and, what's being put in people's hands. The flip side of it is like all of the stuff that you're talking about on, the hyper value side of things, the, extremely specific targeting, finding really strong intent signals, stuff like that. All of those things also are enabled by technology. Like the level of intent and visibility you can get into out of the wider population right now is absolutely astonishing. And for those that have, the willingness and the attention span, as well as the technical capabilities to go and find those signals and leverage them, the ability to be able to get hyper personalized and deliver that, really next level value is, marketers have never had the ability to do that at that level, especially that scale and visibility within it. But the flip side of it is like, there's not a lot of them that understand how to do that, much less are making the effort to do it.
Yeah, so let me give you an example of this, right? Like to the point of like so much being available and technology kind of making access, really available to everyone. So LinkedIn, right? Like everyone uses LinkedIn. Companies and individuals put a lot of data on there. Like the argument can be made like, hey, you just need to go out there and find it. You need to go find what you're looking for. I don't know if you guys have heard of Adam Schoenfeld's new startup. It's Peer Signal. And all it does is take that data and serve it up in a way that's highly valuable to the maybe buyer that he's aiming at. Like it's kind of an incubation stage, and I don't know that they fully understand what the product is, but what they're providing for free right now is super insightful. Like hiring data is available on LinkedIn, but they've taken that and they've put in different dimensions like, hey, what stage is the company at? What's their annual revenue? What's their growth year over year? And they've kind of added that, all data that you can find, right? Crunchbase, LinkedIn, but they brought it together in kind of this peer collaborated data set. And then you can just access it for free. Like that's a great way to provide that hyper value that I'm talking about. And now you've got an audience that just trusts you. Like, oh, you're willing to just give me this product for free? Great.
Yep. And I mean, it's gotten so far, at least on my side of it, it never ceases to amaze me, these platforms that are out there. I mean, Jared and I are dealing with this on the community side of things right now, where like they get you really, really good data, but it's siloed and it's in one place. And so it makes it really, really difficult to operationalize like you're talking about, where you can marry that data with other signals or other pieces of information, enrich it, whatever. And more, like I keep finding myself having to go create custom CDPs relative to kind of where I'm at, what I'm trying to do, because it is so hard to get all of that data that you need into one place, just using out of the box integrations, stuff like that. And, back to that, piece about technology allowing us to get to so much more information. The problem is a lot of this data lives in really kind of odd places that doesn't necessarily easily fit within the framework of technology we've typically used to run a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's you mentioned CDP, like such a dominant trend that we're dealing with like literally on a day-to-day basis. And probably the first time I think that organizations are saying integration isn't our friend, right? Like the opinionation of these different data structures, MA to CRM to a customer success platform to their own application, right? Like it's just become too difficult to integrate all those different data sources. And so now you see this whole new trend where it's like, well, all those integrations we've been doing for the past decade, that's actually not the answer to that. Like, let's get the data out. Let's use an ETL. Let's, transform it in a way that's useful. And let's actually get to the bottom of the insights here.
Yeah. And I think the data pipelines, all of the, orchestration tools, all of that stuff that, again, it's the democratization of tech. It's stuff that used to only be available to, large enterprises and, places that had, a team of, Python developers or whatever that could go and actually build this stuff. And now you've got, more and more providers out there that are giving you sort of, orchestration light solutions,
Sure.
where you can go and sort of start doing all of this stuff with a bare bones team.
Orchestration's a really interesting space because I wonder if the decision not too far in the future isn't going to be, can AI, can machine learning just do a better job of understanding a buyer's movement than a RevOps team? And I don't think that that decision is too far off there unless RevOps kind of gets its act together, quite frankly.
Yeah, I've been where you're at as far as like me thinking that, and then I go and play with the state of the art of what's out there relative to it, and it's like, yeah, it's so far off.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the problem with B2B tech, right? Like the technology's there, the tools that are available to B2B marketers, not so much.
Yeah. And definitely part of it too, though, is just, it's just sample size. Like, there is validity to the concept, but most, especially, early-ish stage startups and stuff like that, they're not doing enough volume to be able to allow machine learning or AI or whatever to be able to go and actually make, reliable insights out of it. And anytime you've got a sample size that's too small, you're as likely to pull the wrong answers out of it as you are the right ones. So, I think that was one of the major problems that, companies like Everstring and Mentigo and stuff like that were trying to do, the lead scoring through, an AI, engine ran into was, it was like, hey, this is supposed to be based off of what's in your database, in your CRM, as far as, won deals or, qualified opportunities, whatever. I mean, for most companies, like you're talking like hundreds, maybe like a few thousand, like that's not enough data to go make intelligent models off of.
So I agree. I think that's also where the concept of, the democratization of those insights also becomes a little bit easier at a different level. But I want to tell my favorite Everstring story, because we looked at the predictive analytics space, years ago, like 2015. And they came back to us with the model and they're like, all right, here's the number one indicators. And we're like, all right, but that number one right there is unsubscribe. Because that, you know what I mean? Like that's what modeling can do when you don't have the insights to understand, the signals that you're really looking at. So of course we revamped that model, but I always thought that was an interesting first pass.
Yeah, I was an early beta user of Everstring before they were even charging for it, and watched them through many pivots until they were finally acquired. But and it wasn't just Everstring. Every one of them struggled to figure out, like, hey, how do we actually apply this? Like, they all came out the gate. It was like everybody was super excited and raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and and then it was like people got in and started using it. It was like, this isn't helping me at all.
Yep. It's an expensive list, Paul.
Exactly. It's very expensive list, Paul. Well, cool. So on the flip side of it, what out of all of this that we've been talking about has you, particularly excited?
Or what aren't we talking about that has you excited? Because there could be something far out in left field.
Yeah, I mean, the pace of tech is always exciting to me, right? But what's probably most exciting to me is I hope that the next generation of kind of software tools is being developed and is kind of waiting in the wings, because everything that used to be so innovative and so on a decade ago has been acquired, and we all know what happens as a result of those situations. So I think there's a lot of great opportunity out there, and I think what we've learned about how buyers behave is kind of shaking off those old straight line kind of buyer journeys that everyone had in their mind that we thought we were going to facilitate, and we're going to move people from these nice little nodes. But the promise of technology says, like, hey, we can, CDP, I think, is an early signal within that. Like, hey, we can start householding and really getting advanced with identity management and maybe making sense out of some of these crazy buyer journeys if we just shake off that thinking that was so prohibitive previously. So, I mean, tech is always exciting to me. The state of tech right now certainly is not, but what I see coming out and then what is a potential to be applied here. I hope someone's working on the next cool thing out there, because we desperately need it.
So Justin, your prediction, like what space was cool that became saturated because of acquisition, vertical integration, dare I say that MA?
Yeah, totally. I think marketing, if you talk to a marketer 10 years ago, marketing automation was just like, wow, holy, like I first saw it in 2007, right? And I was like, this is what I've been waiting on. And now that's not the case, right?
So you're talking like MA products, like deal room?
No, like Marketo, like HubSpot, right?
Okay.
Like yeah.
No, but I'm saying what's going to be next? Like what category? I mean, if you had this answer, like what category needs to be created? To answer all the questions.
I mean, if I had that answer, I'd be creating the category right now as well. But
it's not exactly easy to create a category, but yeah.
Totally. I mean, like, I think that the most interesting concept is the one that, buyers are not different when they're at work, when they're at home. And you really need to kind of understand this massive amount of data that folks are providing online. So like, I like the concepts behind things like CDP as as an early kind of stutter step into that space. When you look at like engagement platforms today, like you're starting to see everything that used to be within a marketing automation platform kind of be blown up and fractionalized. You've got folks like Braze out there that I think are doing a great job at the engagement side of the house, the email side of the house, the channel, SMS, so on and so forth. You've got, players in the CDP space that are now really starting to get more mature around identity management and event tracking and things of that nature. So the promise of that, like one single B2B tool that's going to be like the marketer's platform, their place to reside, I think we've dispelled that myth at this point, right? Like you can't be best in breed. You can't deal with all of that complexity with like this super easy, single button tool out there. Like the concepts behind it are complex. And so again, I don't know how, like what the entrant that's going to bring all those different elements together, but I do like what Braze is doing. I do like what, some CDP players out there like Telium are doing, like Blueconic. It's just not easy to use yet. And whoever makes that easy to use, I think is going to be along a nice path.
Are there certain things, especially in like the B2B SaaS space, that you feel strongly should or should not be being pushed into a CDP?
Well, right now, I don't even know what a CDP is, right? Like there's just
that is absolutely fair. Everybody has their own definition of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the promise of CDP is being able to track every digital footprint that the buyer provides to us, transform that in a way that allows us to leverage it for future communications, right? Like that's not where CDP is at right now. To the point there, like everyone's got a CDP for marketing, a CDP for sales, an organizational CDP. The concept behind it, I think, is really powerful. How that's entered the market is just in those early beginning stages. But I love that concept of truly being able to get our arms around both the digital and the offline footprint, and then bring that together in a way that really fosters intelligence for that, within that buyer and how we should create that conversation. From a technology standpoint, we're not there yet.
I think it raises an interesting point though. Like I think everybody wants, and at least to some degree, maybe even needs like that easy button. But the easy button's also how we sort of got where we are right now, where everybody kept pushing the same button, and now it's blown up in everybody's faces. But at the end of the day, like the tools and stuff like that, whether it's marketing automation platforms, sequencing tools, whatever, like the misuse of them was not necessarily the way that had to play out. But I think it's one of the problems that we run into with tech, and what it enables us to do is that the bulk of people that it winds up in their hands of have no idea what they should be doing with And so then like it gets misused, it blows up in everybody's faces, and we all have to deal with the consequences of it. At a bare minimum, like they don't get internally the value out of it that they should. And I think for me, like that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we face, which is how do we level people up and get them to a level of sophistication that they can actually effectively leverage these tools, and stop using them as an easy button.
Well, that is the biggest problem in marketing today, and what could potentially, quote unquote, kill marketing is the fact that there is no degree, there is no certification, there is no minimum, viable skill set that we can stamp on someone and say, all right, they're ready to use these tools. The biggest, I put a post up the other day, like the biggest byproduct of technology has not been software, it's been skill set. And the way that folks have captured that skill set is largely on the job. So now you've got, a very narrow understanding of how to use that technology within a certain environment, and that's not scalable. Like how do you judge the pedigree of a marketer these days? Really only by the logo that they worked for previously. Oh, you did a great job over at Google or Snowflake, any like high performing organization, so I'm going to hire you, you must be good. There's just nothing that we can look at to understand that someone truly knows all those facets of marketing, all those facets of technology, and can bring them together in a best in class, best practice manner.
And I mean, in my experience, at least in earlier stage startups, like those people that have done that at the big brands and stuff like that are oftentimes the worst ones you could put in that type of a role, because what they used there, because I mean, at the stage that you're at one of those big name brands, like you've gone past like most of the early discovery stage, like, hey, we've got really big levers to pull and foundation to lay. Like it's, hey, what are the little things we can do to stack 1% here, 0.5% there, and if we do enough of them, then we can squeeze something significant out of it. Versus the other side of it, like you're having to figure it out. You're having to make it up as you go. You're having to create it. You're having to figure out what those levers are and all of that stuff. They're wildly different skill sets within that. And, it's honestly where the best marketers I've ever hired in my career were people straight out of college, oftentimes with no degree had anything to do with what I wound up having them do, especially from liberal arts colleges, where they were trained to think. And that was really it. And for the large part, I just put them in that role and said, go figure it out.
That concept of environmental fit. I actually ran a skunkworks project with one of my data scientists around this, like great, super smart dude. And we were trying to come up with like hiring profiles. And so we coupled, folks that were in the role, traits that we thought they exhibited that made them great, like where have they worked in the past? Does that look like where we work and what we need out of them? I can't say that we cracked the code on it, but I think that aspect of like environmental fit is such an under leveraged dimension.
Yeah, I mean the people I've had in those roles that were super successful, it was like, hey, I was a communications major, or hey, I was doing English, or whatever, like history major, nothing at all to do with it. Like, hey, come do this. And
that figure it out. Yeah, that figure it out quotient is so critical.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, it's like, I'll take somebody who is intellectually curious and a hustler over somebody that's got many years experience in a specific role or specific training any day. Like sure. I can train up the technical pieces of it. I have been wildly unsuccessful trying to train intellectual curiosity and hustle with people.
It's hard for both of them, because sometimes that hustle alone will run through a brick wall without thinking about why. Right.
Yeah, that combination can be a unique when you go try and find
that's a space that needs to be disrupted, quite frankly, is that entire talent hiring skill set evaluation type area.
Well, I mean, the funniest part, I do a lot of reading and research into behavioral economics, decision making, psychology, stuff like that.
Light reading on a weekend, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it might say something to me about me that's fun, but but one of the dirty little secrets is if you've not done extensive training in how to address and counteract your own subconscious biases, we are all, every one of us, worse than a coin flip at hiring somebody. And
Totally
for
agree.
any of us to believe that we're any better than that, I mean, in my experience, the only way I have done better than that is by hiring based off of references and referrals of people that I've worked with and I respect their opinion of. Other than that, I'm right there with them. I'm literally worse than a coin.
I'm gonna leave that right there because it's too objective and too real.
But yeah, I mean, and then it gets really interesting when you start looking at like the data behind and the stats behind a lot of the things that we do. And it's like, yeah, no, we're not anywhere near as good at that stuff as we think we are.
That scales out everywhere. Yeah, I mean, look at VC investment success, and you'll find the same thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I still do it to this day. Like I try and actively trade and all of that stuff on at the stock exchanges, and it's like I know beyond a doubt, like if just going and putting my money in a S&P fund is the best thing that I could do. And it over a long enough horizon, it outperforms everything else I do. But I still go in there and actively trade.
Gambling's too much fun.
So
exactly.
Justin, how'd you get to where you're at now? Like who is Justin Gray?
Well, frankly, I got to where I'm at now completely by accident, which I think is common to folks that wear an entrepreneurial hat and so on. But strangely, I did go to school for marketing. Sounded like an exciting area to be to me. I originally was a journalism major, loved to write. Found out that didn't pay very well, so I picked marketing off the shelf and thought that was going to be a good career. It sucked. My first 3 jobs were just boring as hell, right? Like I thought that's what marketing was. It was, I won't go into the benign details, but like very much what you consider marketing.
ERPs? ERPs aren't fun.
Exactly. Yeah. Construction management software was one of those roles. But then I stumbled upon, literally through a referral, a startup, and they had 5 employees. I was employee number 6. Came on as their marketing director, and just I found what I was looking for, right? Like I love doing multiple things. I don't want to be like in a box. I love the ability to like stand on my own in terms of performance. Hey, here's your budget. Here's what we need to do. And so we grew the hell out of that company. And when I left there, I knew I wanted to do more of that. And that led to me starting my own agency as well as other businesses. And the agency I started was, of course, LeadMD, that ultimately was acquired as part of the Shift Paradigm roll up. But that was completely by accident as well, right? Like, and it was marketing automation focused. I had bought Marketo at the previous startup, saw how great the promise of it was, but also how difficult it was to implement and train my staff on, and ended up doing a lot of that stuff myself, like creating training materials and models, like, hey, how do we build a nurture? How do we build a scoring model? Back then we were of course doing it by hand. And so, had some folks reach out to me and say, hey, can you help us in the same way that you had, helped and built BillingTree? And I said, yeah, I'm happy to do it on a consulting basis, right? And so those were our first clients at LeadMD. And we rode that wave, certainly, as Marketo kind of became a rocket ship, and then started supporting CRMs and other MA platforms, and then eventually just all these different marketing tools. And technology really was the underpinning of LeadMD. But as I said before, coupling that with the ability to fill gaps on the strategy side, on the process side, or the process build side, and then even the staff augmentation side, was a gap that the market needed desperately. So really, truly an organic business that was formed by accident. And I love that bug. I definitely have that bug in terms of finding something, it's a problem, someone's struggling with something. Hey, how would I solve this in a way that I can build a business around? And that's still how I like to build businesses today.
What yeah, what are your passions outside of building businesses?
I mean, a lot of what I do outside of work is work, right? Like, so I invest in early stage startups or organizations that have founders that I believe in. I'm an LP over at Stage 2 Capital, where obviously we focus on kind of growth stage companies.
PLG too, right? Like a little, like quite PLG leaning.
Well,
Yeah.
everyone loves PLG these days, right? Like, so if you put that up on your website, it's going to get someone's attention. But I love their thesis.
We're all in on PLG to the point where RevOps is GrowthOps with us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a hell of a value prop. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? Like, how are you going to get value out of this, and realize that before you buy? It kind of just flips that traditional process on its head. Beyond that, I've got 2 kids, which obviously eat up a ton of my time. I got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. 3-year-old's a girl, 5-year-old's a boy. So lots of birthday parties and baseball and all the stuff that goes in with that. And when my wife and I have some sort of a semblance of spare time, we travel, we eat. Basically, we're just gluttons for pleasure and food, right? So, but we managed to have a good time.
Right on. How could how can everybody get in touch with you? I mean, there's LinkedIn here, but like, what else? Give some plugs how to get into you and all that.
Yeah, so obviously you can go check out shiftparadigm.com. That's my day job. Absolutely will respond there. My email, jgray@shiftparadigm.com, is the best way to get in touch with me. As I've said many times in the past, LinkedIn, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I will respond. Not if you're trying to sell me something, but if you have a question, I'm happy to take time and hopefully provide some value. I love talking to folks that are early in their career, trying to figure out how they want to develop, folks that want to become entrepreneurs or are already in that space. Those conversations are fun to me. So yeah, definitely hit me up and happy to chat.
Awesome.
That's all I got, Jason.
That's all I got. You got anything?
We ran the gamut there, guys.
Yep.
So this has all been recorded. This is going to be anywhere and everywhere. Jason's also playing around with streaming it to Mars.
Sweet. You get Elon's attention there.
Oh yeah, might as well put it everywhere we can. Well, thanks for joining us, Justin. This has been fantastic. We'll get copies of the recording out to anybody that RSVP'd, and then come back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be up here again.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.